Hello and welcome back once again to the Single Malt Review. We've got another non-whiskey here, which Dave is going to introduce.
It is once again whiskey adjacent. We have looked in the past at the fortified wines that have formed the backbone of casks, which influenced some of the greatest whiskey we've ever tried. We've tried Oloroso Sherry. We have tried Pedro Jimenez. Now we're moving on to one of my favourites. We know I'm a sucker for Tawny Port finishes for Scotch whiskey, and we have today some Tawny Port. This is Graham's. Now the Graham brothers set up shop in Portugal in 1820 selling textiles. By 1890 they had their own vineyards, and now the company is still going strong producing a range of port.
Yes, indeed. And so I guess you call this the ultimate deconstruction of Scotch whiskey. We're going to try, we're going to see where these casks came from with this rather smart little bottle of 10-year-old Tawny.
Tawny Port starts its life as fairly conventional red wine, only before it finishes fermenting, when there's still some sugar there, a whole lot of brandy is added. The fortification that kills the ferment but preserves some of those sugars. It then goes into oak. Sits there, in this case, for 10 years. I'm not 100% certain if they use a Solera system or not. I couldn't find reference to it on their website, which was the extent of my scholarly research.
More typically they don't, because though you'd expect port to be quite a sort of a Spanish or Portuguese endeavour, home of the Solera country really, it's a very British kind of a thing, because though it's made in Portugal, the actual selling of it, all the port houses, or at least most of them, are very British, because it was all sort of what you could stuff back in your hold when you were done selling your wool or whatever else you were selling in Portugal or stopping off, and a fortified wine that would keep was the obvious kind of a thing. So the whole industry of buying and selling port, that was really more of a British thing than it was anybody else's. So that's why you find a lot of the names are conspicuously Normo compared to what you might expect from Portuguese kind of thing.
Exactly how the Graham brothers got their start. They owed a debt, and they were paid in 27 barrels of fortified wine. It was all uphill from there. So we're sampling today out of these curious port sippers.
Yes. I thought, I don't condone this monstrosity of a glass. Oh my goodness, I don't even want to... I don't like to even look at this. It looks like...
They've been on your shelf or mocking us with their presence for probably at least 10, maybe 15 years.
This is the first time they've been used. It may be the only time they've been used, and I can finally put them to rest. These are, as far as I've been able to research, which only confirmed what I, as a sensible, functioning human being, already knew, has served no purpose whatsoever. They are entirely for... what's a gift I can give to someone and I can't bloody think of anything else? They drink wine, here we go. The rationale is you're supposed to sort of sip it out of this ludicrous straw here, which is a tremendous way of getting all the aroma of the wine, as everybody knows, a straw. And it's supposed to take it from the bottom of the glass, the unoxidized portion.
Well, there's no air contact. Presumably the fortified wine on the top is just oxidizing and rotting. That's
just the... Can't you see it smoking off the glass? Good grief! Who would? Insanity. Insanity is what these are. So this is going to be possibly their final outing. We'll do them their due. See what happens. So
I have this idea of someone dual wielding one of these and a show home style curly Victorian tobacco pipe.
Goodness.
Just take a drip, pour one, then
it's
the
just
other.
A whole. It's anyway. It shouldn't do the port any harm.
It won't detract from the port.
So it does mean you have to sniff and drink completely independently. So that's something.
Well, that is a lovely aroma, though. It's
But
full of rich berry fruits.
I know. Doesn't
brandy.
even fit in this thing.
It is a very pleasant aroma.
Going one nostril at a time here, because that's all I can actually get in range.
Welcome to my world with your average wine glass.
So it's a wonderfully subtle aroma, and it's quite... It's not very grapey. It's stunningly non-grapey. It's sort of cinnamon spiced, a bit of allspice, and it's kind of biscuity, like a malt biscuit kind of a thing.
Oodles of brandy, lots of plums, a bit of fig, some honey.
And there's chocolate, like everybody says, and like that's the prime note we discovered when we looked at our the various key finishes and what they bring to the whiskey. Time and again, chocolate is what comes through from port. Be it ruby, be it tawny, chocolate is what seems to manifest every single time, and it is significantly in the wine, and it's a real milk chocolate as well. You wouldn't think you'd get milky kind of characteristics from anything derived from grape, but you sort of do. It's really quite interesting, and I'm doubting myself as I shove my nostril into it. These are so silly. All right, so let's go and have a suck here. I can't even take myself seriously. Anyway, so it's quite light. It's quite light and juicy, and that's the weird thing about Tawny Port. Regular Tawny Port, no age Tawny Port, is a wee bit heavier than Ruby, has a wee bit more going on, a wee bit more density, but as it ages, it actually gets lighter and lighter and lighter. If you could lose your mind and go and taste some 40-year-old Tawny Port, which you can do, it's not that cataclysmically expensive compared to other things that are 40 years old. It gets lighter and lighter as the years go on, because the wood that these are aged in is one really quite big. The barrels involved in here are pretty huge, and they're very, very, very old. They've been used for centuries sometimes, so they're not getting any oak flavour imparted. They're not getting stronger. They're just sort of, they're not doing a lot of evaporation. They're not being concentrated like a Scotch would be as it aged, like any spirit would be. They're just, the tannin and the particulates are just slowly falling out of the wine, and it's becoming more and more sort of purified and lighter bodied. And at 10 years old, you can see the beginning of this happening. It is, if you just line up a 10-year-old versus a straight-up tawny, 10-year-old, it will look lighter, and it will taste lighter as well, which seems counteractive for people used to spirits, but it's, when you're in the world of port, everything's a wee bit different.
There's a rich, heavy, slightly fiery, raisiny quality to it, similar to a Pedro Jimenez. Only here, clearly, there's a much more of a red wine influence, because there is actual wine. PX, famously, the grape juice is not fermented before and is fortified with brandy. Here, the fermentation is well underway. I'm going to empty this into a proper glass.
I think that's a good call. That's a good call. We've had the experience now.
This is a very robust offering at 20% ABV. That is a strong fella.
Yeah, ports range from, I can't even make that stand up, so stupid as the last. Ports range from maybe 17 on the abject, real cronk-ass low end, to, I've seen vintage ones which are 21, and they may even get teensy bit higher, but 20, that's slightly higher than usual. The average is about 18, I suppose, 18, 19, but yeah, there is a range, and 20 is pretty good. We're halfway to whiskey at this point, so you think of port as sort of a wine, won't do you too much harm. It's still halfway to whiskey, It's a fairly hefty old beverage.
Also, these port sippers, they're deceptively voluminous. Look at the pour I have here. This is about twice what I normally pour for a whiskey sample on this channel. That is a...
Well, you got it exactly right in that case, with being half a whiskey. So prescient stuff. But they are a wee bit bigger than they look. But yeah. So I mean, I think in summary, this is a very good port. But really, you'll find all ports very good port because it's very, very tightly controlled. It's it behooves the makers and the sellers of port to maintain that quality because as one of the very, very first, it almost invented the DOC status. I guess French wine did, champagne probably did, but port was pretty hot on the heels. So you will not see port, we might see some port because we're a very long way from Europe, and there's a few Australian manufacturers that like to make a sneaky port or two.
They generally call it now just Tawny or Ruby.
Tawny or Ruby or port style.
They dropped the use of a port label some years ago.
But as long as you don't want to try and sell things in the EU,
it is really very good though.
The world police aren't coming after you. It's just an EU regulation. So
the Australian fortified wines are excellent. However, I mainly picked this one because of its affordability and because I wanted a good aged Tawny Port to try as an exemplar of the cask type. And Graham's is quite well reviewed. It's not the most expensive top of the shelf, but it is both affordable but also of good inconsistent quality. As an aside, I had some dark chocolate here as a traditional pairing for this kind of desserty fortified wine. This is Whittaker's Dark Ghana, a sustainably sourced 72% cocoa offering, and a personal favourite.
Chocolate strawberries is a good one. Blue cheese is sort of the pairing for port, and I think for a good reason. I'll love a blue cheese in port. But there's a few things you don't normally think about. Just an oat biscuit is a very good port, just as a contrast. Blueberries, fresh blueberries, with a lighter style port like this, really quite nice. The chocolate, depending on which one you get, can almost be a bit strong for more light-bodied ports, but strawberries you're completely safe because they're not going to overpower anything unless they're a really, really, really ripe strawberry, and even then you're probably pretty safe. But yeah, chocolate, good one to
you
go
can
for.
really taste the influence that then goes into those casks and then goes into the whiskey, which is finished in those casks. It is so potent and so evocative that it transfers over well. Some things you can't really taste all the commonalities, but with Tawny Port, yeah, you can taste what has carried over to the whiskey.
Yeah. No, good stuff. If anyone hasn't tried port, it's not quite. It doesn't occupy the same hell that sherry does in terms of it's completely outmoded and no one wants to drink it. Port still has a bit of a following, but not a enormous one. Which maybe is lucky because Portugal. You thought Scotland was a small producer. Portugal is not a biggie, and they only produce it on the the banks of the Douro River as well. So it's a tiny part of Portugal. So. Actually, maybe we shouldn't popularise port, or it will become rapidly unavailable.
I am still waiting for the grand fortified wine revival on par with gin. 15 years ago, no one who was cool would touch gin because it's old. Whereas fortified wine similarly has an outdated, dusty reputation, but it is sweet, quite high in alcohol, and just really tasty on its own. So I can see it easily having the same kind of resurgence.
Well, yeah,
Mark my words, 5-10 years from now, there will be sherry bars and port bars from New York to London.
Well, like I said with the sherries, eventually the flat caps will align and lock into place.
It'll have all the hipster cred again.
We'll be ready. We'll be ready. We'll be on the ground level of that stuff. Yeah, sherry influences. What a gig. What a gig. Anyway.
Yes, Tawny Port, it is lovely. It is really worth a try, especially whether you're interested in the whiskey connection or not.
Yeah, I think it's good stuff. And if you haven't tried it, then get into it because it's whereas sherry comes with a lot of caveats, which we sort of described. It's not for everybody. Port is a sweet drink. It's for everybody. If no one can't handle port, it's fine. It's in the that goes into my children's booze category of stuff that's just universally approachable. It's just scrummy. It's a drink that doesn't aim to challenge; it aims to please, and that's pretty much the long and the short of the port. So there you go. Take that as you will. Don't buy those awful port snifters. Don't give them to people as a present. They won't use them. They'll just take up space on the shelf. Lunacy. All right. That's been us with the port. Thank you very much, Slarge. We'll be back with something maybe a bit more conventional next time around, so stay with us then. So we've got any tape left.